Obedience versus fasting. Disobedience connected to captivity. The future of the holy city of Jerusalem. Israel defended against her enemies, the coming king saving his people, and the future fall of Mystery Babylon. Today on 3-in-1, as we consider Zechariah chapter 7 through 9 and Revelation chapter 18. In chapters 1 through 6 of the book of Zechariah, there were 8 evening visions encouraging the people in the present to trust God. Then in chapters 7 and 8, there is instruction given to the people concerning fasting and obedience and the future of Jerusalem. And then in chapters 9 through 14, there will be visions looking far forward all the way to the return and the reign of the Messiah, Jesus. So the prophetic ministry of Zechariah was not only to encourage and exhort in the moment, in the present, to those who were weary in the work, but it was also to lift their heads past their present circumstances on into the future glory of God. Listen to some of those descriptions of Jerusalem, the Jerusalem to come, from Zechariah chapter 8. In chapter 8, verse 1, we read, "Again, the word of the Lord of hosts came, saying, Thus says the Lord of hosts, I am zealous for Zion with a great zeal. With great fervor I am zealous for her. Thus says the Lord, I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. Thus says the Lord of hosts, old men and old women shall again sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each one with his staff in his hand because of great age. The streets of the city shall be full of boys and girls playing in its streets." Sounds awesome, doesn't it? Sounds like the millennial kingdom, when Jesus will be ruling and reigning tangibly and swiftly here on earth. And oh, what a day that is going to be. And sometimes, guys, even for us, it is good for us to do a little heavenly daydreaming, to think about the time that Jesus will rule and reign here on earth, when kids can play in the streets and walk to the park without having any problems. To look past our present problems on into a day when there will be no more pain, no more tears, no more trouble, only unhindered fellowship with God in His kingdom prepared for us. Now, as we've said a number of times, that day will not come until it is birthed into the world. And in order for God's kingdom to be birthed into the world, there will have to be a time of transition, a time of tribulation, a time that we've been reading about in the book of Revelation. Today in Revelation 18, we read about the spectacular destruction of false religion. Yesterday in Revelation 17, we read about the description of false religion, and it was given the name Mystery Babylon. Now, think of the few times when Jesus was truly angry. Interestingly, they were never when he was personally insulted or assaulted. It was rather when the common people were interrupted in their endeavor to worship God. And they were interrupted by the corrupt religious leadership who were personally profiting off of their religious roadblocks. Religious roadblocks, making it unnecessarily difficult to get to God. Jesus hated that. It really made him very angry enough to call them out publicly, saying things like, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when you have succeeded, you make him twice as much a child of hell as you are." It sounds like Jesus is pretty angry there. Why? Well, because of these religious roadblocks, because of the religious rulers, how they made it difficult to get to God by heaping upon the people heavy burdens that they were never given by God. And Jesus was so angered by this that he said things like this, "What sorrow also awaits you, experts in religious law, for you crush people with unbearable religious demands, and you never lift a finger to ease the burden." Now, remember, these unbearable burdens, these religious roadblocks, were never given by God. They were enforced by false religious rulers in an attempt to extort loyalty and profitability from the people who genuinely just wanted to worship God. And this is what angered Jesus in the Gospels. And Jesus was not afraid to publicly call them out on their religious hypocrisy, saying things like this: "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness." Now, we know that the anger over things like this led Jesus to do more than just call them out. There were at least 2 separate occasions where Jesus walked into the temple and cleaned house, literally, his Father's house that was supposed to be a house of prayer for all nations. Listen to the following from the Gospel of Mark. "So they came to Jerusalem, and then Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares through the temple. Then he taught, saying to them, 'Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it into a den of thieves?'" Now, how did the hypocritical religious leadership make this house of prayer into a den of thieves? And how is this heaping heavy burdens on people, interrupting their desire to worship God? Well, the money changers, in cooperation with the corrupt religious leadership, would force the pilgrims to purchase approved temple sacrifices. And if they had foreign currency, they would also force them to exchange their currency first, at exorbitant rates, of course. And all of this took place in the court of the Gentiles, where all nations were supposed to be able to come and worship God. But instead, they were interrupting these precious people with seemingly religious roadblocks, when all the while they were only using the guise of religion to make merchandise of the people. And this got Jesus angry. Now, as we think about Revelation 18 and what we read today, this mystery Babylon was and will be worse. I mean, so much worse than anything that we've talked about thus far with false religion. This mystery Babylon is also called the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth. And she is drunk not only with the profits that she gained from the people, she's drunk with the very blood of the people themselves. It's an eerie verse in this chapter that says that this false religious system will not only make merchandise of the people, but the people themselves will be the merchandise. And Jesus obviously is angered by all of this, and he will flip over more than just tables this time. See, Revelation 18 records in advance, in vivid poetic detail, the ultimate destruction of this false religious system, this mystery Babylon that seems to represent an amalgamation of every false religious system that has ripped off and raped the souls of men and women for centuries. And one day, judgment will fall on this mystery Babylon. And as we mentioned last week, one of the saddest parts of all of this is that men will weep over the fact that they will no longer be able to profit off of the people. False religion, led by frauds, has been for centuries one of the most profitable businesses to be in. And fortunately, one day, God will put an end to it all.